Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Super League. I'm one of your hosts today, Mason Clark, joined by my co-host, Jim Davis. Jim, are you excited for some modern action?
Yeah, this is great. I feel like this is a pretty cool intersection of content and high level play. I've been playing in more Pro Tours recently after doing content for so long, and there's definitely a divide at times. I feel like I'm either in Pro Tour mode or in content mode, and this is a fun chance to do both.
Yeah, I think so often people think people who play Pro Tours are like super serious and they never joke and they never have fun. And I think you can test this, Jim, that some of the most fun times are like the top players. They joke and relax. And yeah, when they're in the feature match area, they're trying hard. But afterwards, we're all cutting each other up, making jokes, and it's a good experience. It's just really fun.
There's a lot of camaraderie. It's a really, really awesome experience being at a Pro Tour again, where you're trying really hard to win. We're like, us CFB guys, like those handshake guys, we got to take them down a notch, But after the match, me and Ely ran into Nathan and Abe in the airport on the way to the last Pro Tour. And it was just a great hour of just kind of like hanging out and chatting and stuff too. So it's a good mixture of competitiveness and friendliness, and it's just great.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to see exactly what everyone brings to this event because, there's a lot of, the Super League is this thing kind of has history to it, right? Back in the old days, 5-6 years ago, this was a big thing. And for a lot of us here, this is our first time in the Super League, and we all want to have fun and bring a good extreme to y'all, but we also kind of want to win, So I'm excited to see what people are bringing to game in these weeks.
Yeah, it's cool. Like Super League ended, I think, in 2018 was the count, right? And a lot has happened for me since then, both content wise and tournament wise. So I remember kind of watching it back then, and now it's like, oh, now I'm here at a part of it. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super exciting. I personally, used to watch all the Super Leagues in the past, and to get here and start off with you is such an awesome experience. And I can't wait to see what Javier and YungDingo are playing. We're going to get to them in just a minute. But first, I do want to kind of quickly say, Jim, what did you bring this week while we're waiting on these players?
So it's funny. So I played Yawgmoth at the Pro Tour, and me, Reed, Aspiring Spike, Jakob, and Will played it, and it wasn't a very good choice for the tournament. It was a good deck in a vacuum. I think the deck is actually very powerful, has a lot of Lord of the Rings cards in it, but for that specific event, the top 5 decks weren't great matchups. But I just really like the deck a lot, and yeah. I think I really like how it plays. I'm definitely obviously a fan of kind of creature-y, combo-y creature decks, with goblins and so on and so forth in the past, and I just like how it plays a lot. Haven't played a lot of Modern since then, with the new sets coming out and so on and so forth. So playing Yawgmoth, change a few sideboard cards, and then just ready to rock and roll.
Heck, what about you? That's so exciting. I brought creativity. It's a deck that I don't normally play a ton of, but I was a little worried that maybe there'd be some metagaming. I've been playing a lot of Scam recently in 4-color, and YungDingo plays the same thing. So I decided to play creativity, which is like 4-color adjacent, and it's a pretty fun deck to play. And so I was like, I think this deck's good enough and sort of sidesteps enough of it. And so that's what I decided to bring. But I don't love my matchup against you. We're gonna have to see how I do when the time comes.
Yeah, I got those rings. It's a very interesting Yawgmoth list because it's a Reed Duke special. Reed kind of was advocating for this version of a list. It's more mid-rangey. Surprise, surprise, right?
Whoa, what a shocker!
I know, right? And with the rings in it and the ability to kind of play a fair game, and it's less all in on the combo, but you can combo too, which is nice. So it's a pretty cool thing to have access to.
Speaking of comboing, I think let's start some Magic. I think they're ready for us. So let's head on down to the feature match area and get this going.
Sounds great.
So on the bottom of your screen here, you're going to see YungDingo playing the Rakdos Scam list. Here on the Super League, we call it Scam. On the top, you're going to see Javier Dominguez playing the Hammer deck with a little bit of a splash of black right now. Jim, what do you think about that and sort of what maybe made Javier go that direction?
It's funny, actually. So Hammer was totally off the radar for Pro Tour Lord of the Rings. It was a deck that just kind of was not even a thought process for a lot of people. It actually did really, really well for the small amount of players who did play it. I believe it had one of the highest win percents in the field, which kind of makes sense because, we cut a lot of our Force of Vigors and we cut a lot of our sideboard cards that would be good against them, and it's just the cyclical nature of formats where a deck is not doing very well, everyone starts ignoring it and starts to do well again. So it kind of makes sense here. Javier ahead of the curve as usual, and is going to try and see if we can get a little bonks going.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It looks like the players are mulliganing. They both did. Javier going to 6 and Dingo as well. So we're going to see a Bloodstained Mire in the passing of the turn.
Yeah, still going to be a challenge here, though, for Hammer. Obviously, Scam is very, very good at killing creatures. We see Fury, Bowmasters, a bunch of removal spells, and the dreaded, Fury, Evoke, Scam can kill pretty much the entire Hammer board. So, will Hammer be able to kind of fire off the combo and get a big Hammer hit in? We'll see. Or will it be more of a kind of a grindy game based around Urza Saga and friends?
Yeah, and we saw YungDingo forego scamming out that Fury on turn 1, and Javier, you see Dingo trying to hide his Fury on screen as Javier can't click it, but Javier's going to Thoughtseize him and take something from this hand.
Yeah, I mean, Fury's a big one. Fable's very good too. Obviously, the game kind of bogs down a little bit, and this kind of shows the power of Fable the Mirror Breaker in these decks, where it's not always about planning for Reflections of Kiki Jiki to be doing a lot of stuff. But in a matchup like this, where there's kind of this creaturey deck that's trying to get going, doesn't have a lot of removal, there's a ticking time bomb on the scam side, where once that Fable flips, and now if there's a Fury in play or a Grief in play, we get this sort of pseudo combo lockout. It's not the plan A, but if it gets to that point, it can be devastating.
Yeah. And I wonder, what do you think Javier's maybe thinking about? Because, Javier clearly someone who's a master of the game. We mentioned earlier he has 9 Pro Tour top 8s, which combined with you puts all of us at an average about 3 Pro Tour top finishes, which is great for my ego. But what is maybe going on in his head, and what is he planning out here with this Thoughtseize?
I mean, I think it's the fear of Fury being scary and the fear of Fable possibly in the future. I think that, Javier's hand's not very good here. We got a Lonely Thopter, a couple lands. Now, of course, there's Urza Saga, which is very, very important as far as kind of grinding, making a bunch of tokens or whatever, getting some more card advantage going. But it's to go over the Voidwalker, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe Javier is, thinking if Dingo wants to wait on this Fury, I have the Urza Saga to grind him out, and the Voidwalker is actually pressure. So I'm going to be curious to see how Javier approaches this game going forward, as we do see an Urza Saga for the turn.
Yeah, it is cool to see Javier be like, all right, we'll play a long game. That's cool. His hammer can do that. It's a very impressive deck. People think of it as like this, infect style one-hit kill kind of deck, but it really can grind very, very well.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that sort of happens when people pick up the hammer deck, is they think they're playing an all-in deck, and they're like, actually, I play like a real mid-range game sometimes. It's pretty impressive, as we do see Fable the Mirror Breaker, speaking of impressive mid-range games.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Oh, how unlucky. Javier has nothing to do, just 3 mana and Urza Saga. How is he this unlucky?
It is crazy how much material this one single card creates. It is definitely one of the most powerful cards in the format. A little out of favor, as far as like the current decks being played, but it really is kind of crazy how powerful this card is.
We do see Dingo discard both his Feigned Death effects off the Fable the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, this is definitely going in. Both players are going up for a longer game here. We can see Javier's, interested in getting Saga going and kind of playing a, make a much permanence kind of game. And then Dingo's like, hey, I'll just cast these Furies. No problem. I don't need to scam anything. If we're going to play a fair, longer game, hard casting Fury is a great place to be.
Yeah, it's such a big part of these elementals, right? Like, we've seen spells like them in the past that they're kind of based on, but having that body attached really makes a difference between this and just, a deal 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Pyrokinesis is the callback, if you will, which was hard cast occasionally, but cost 6 and brought nobody, and was still fine to hard cast sometimes. So getting a mana reduction as well as a very, very strong body that can kill very, very quickly is very, very powerful. And again, we have that Fables, as I was saying. Now this Fables kind of counting down 2 turns from now, and Fables active and Fury's active too. That's just wrath your board every single turn. Think it's gonna be hard for Javier to deal with.
Yeah, Fury is definitely the guy she tells you not to worry about. As we do see Javier searching up with the Urza Saga here, figuring out exactly how he wants to play this game. Does have a hammer in hand already, so you might be thinking about one of his tech slot cards. Decides to go a Springleaf Drum.
Yeah, I mean, Shadow Spear and Hammer are a lot. Obviously, no way to get the hammer on just yet. The tokens are getting big. This is going to be a decent sized swing here. But those Furies, are looking pretty nice.
Yeah, I wonder, it looks like the tokens are bigger than the Fury, so, Dingo waiting might actually just have to wait for the Fable to flip as well before he's actually killing anything besides an Ornithopter.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how the scaling, you think there weren't really many artifacts in play 2 turns ago, and now the Saga by itself making 2 tokens, getting an artifact, and then the Ornithopter finally getting into play here is very impressive. The size is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also loved how Javier sort of held his Ornithopter. Was like, oh, my Sagas won't be that big. Don't worry about it, Dingo. You'll kill him with your Furies. It's so fun, And now he's like, okay, well, I actually have this, and I'm, thinking about equipping the Shadow Spear and just bashing in for a huge life swing.
Yeah, Javier is so good. He fooled me too. I'm just like, oh, wow, they are actually really big. Uh-oh. I mean, we could see a red card drawn here from Dingo, which would allow an Evoke Fury and a Cast Fury, which kind of break things down also. But yeah, definitely Javier's on the board here with a significant presence.
Yeah. If you're Javier, what are you thinking about when it comes to like, equipping Shadow Spear versus maybe developing a hammer? What's kind of going through your head?
I mean, the hammer, there's obviously the awkwardness of the hammer. You kind of want to keep it in your hand. So if you draw Sigarda's Aid, you can use it then, or draw a card off your Pure Steel Paladin. There isn't really a reason to expose it right now, except for pumping the constructs. But I think firing in Shadow Spear is pretty reasonable here. There is the fear of the token being killed in response, obviously, but there's not a lot else going on realistically. And Javier's already at 12, so his life gain is pretty nice too. So just gonna fire in, and it's gonna work out.
Yeah, and Javier attacking, actually swapping the life totals now. Now Dingo's on the back foot, and from playing this matchup a lot, one of the things that ends up happening is Shadow Spear plus Construct is kind of the backup plan for the Hammer play. Obviously they kind of want to knock you down with a big swing, but this is just a really good grinding plan, and we're seeing it kind of work out here in real time.
Yeah, it's a lot of life and a lot of damage very, very fast. Here's Fury. Only get poor Ornithopters waited so long to get on the battlefield and is just immediately dispatched.
Yep. Javier draws Thoughtseize for the turn. Surprisingly, a lot going on this turn, right? We could Thoughtseize, we could draw off the Silent Clearing, we could play the Hammer. When you're in these spots, Jim, and you're actually kind of presenting, like 15 choices, how do you go about figuring it out?
It's tough because you're normally trying to figure out what your opponent's going to do in the next turn, which is usually hidden information. But now we kind of see it on the board. So like you said a few turns ago, now Reflection's about ready to go with Fury as well. So once Reflection starts copying Fury, that's blockers. The double strike can matter as far as first strike damage in combat as well. And there's a lot, that's going to be mopped up in the next turn or two. So really need to figure out how to get through here. I think drawing a card makes a lot of sense. Right now, Javier's behind. It looks good right now. It's about to turn really, really hard.
Yeah, and that is sort of, what the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, like you mentioned, brings, right? It's sort of this really powerful smoothing card and make sure your game plan comes together, and then transitions into an actually very strong late game threat. So we're going to have to see if Javier can overcome it, as it looks like he's thinking about Thoughtseizing right now.
Yeah, getting the second Fury wouldn't be bad, but again, for the most part, Dingo's hand is made. Reflection's in play, Fury's in play. As long as he's able to untap with those safely and maybe survive one turn cycle, it's going to fall apart pretty fast for Javier.
Yep. It's also worth mentioning, these reflection tokens can attack. So if Javier does something like, maybe attack with one of his things, tap the other one with the Springleaf Drum, he might just get 12. And, we talked about how much life we're gaining. Getting attacked for 12 every turn is going to quickly make it so the life total rate swings.
Yeah, that's part of the big part of Fury is it just hits so hard. In the scam deck, it's often a 4/4 hitting for 8. The amount of damage it comes across is astounding.
Yeah. So we do see a Thoughtseize fired off here. We're going to have to see what Javier wants to go for between Grief and Fury, 2 of the stars of the Modern Horizon 2 set.
Yeah, I imagine it's got to be Fury here. The Grief could potentially pick off one of these hammers, but right now these hammers are redundant anyway, lacking a way to equip them. Obviously would love to see a draw of a Sigarda's Aid or a Paladin. Getting a hammer onto a construct here, if one of the constructs can survive the turn, would be huge. Allowing them to kind of size up and be out of Fury range, and of course be gaining a ton of life and doing a ton of damage.
Yep. I also really love how Javier sort of, we kind of all agree, right? You're going to take the Fury, you kind of know it, but he double checks his work. And that's why Javier has all these great finishes. He double checks his work. Even if it's obvious, it doesn't hurt to take that extra 1 second and just double check. Dingo does fire off the Grief. Going to see just an Arid Mesa in hand.
Yeah, so a big thing here, like I was saying, is having the first strike damage with Fury on defense. So you can use the 4 damage from the Fury as well as the first strike on both copies of Fury and try and line up blocks that are looking pretty good. So I think that Dingo is very, very close turning the corner here. Going to need a draw from Javier.
Yeah, Javier picks up Ink Moss Nexus. That could be a way to maybe actually steal this game if he can, catch Dingo sort of slipping on the Fable of the Mirror Breaker activation. But, we didn't mention it. Dingo picked up Feign Death for the turn last turn. So he can actually, block with the Fury and then Feign Death to bring it back. And we're seeing, Dingo activating Grief in the draw step, trying to make sure Javier doesn't draw anything out to get out of this. A little draw step, no fun for you. Dingo's really fun at parties. You should invite him. He likes to make it so you don't get to play with cards.
Good grief.
That was a good joke. I'm not furious about it personally.
This is interesting. It's just though now we have a combat step where the constructs are pretty big. Dingo's at 5. 5 is not very much, and this trample on the construct is a decent amount, but +1 from Nexus activating into an artifact makes it an 8/8 trample, and then the other construct is also lethal as well, which can be blocked by the Goblin Shaman. And again, I think this really is the turn where if Dingo untaps safely here, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And interesting to see the Grief there. Dingo must have done all the math here and seen that okay, I think it's safe enough to check for the card you drew and then still survive the combat. So we'll see how it all plans out.
Yeah, I think Dingo picking up the Feign Death really helped him sort of with that decision, because now it's like, okay, I can just throw everything at these constructs, make sure I trade off, and then, the one that lives, I take a little bit of damage, but I Feign Death, I finish it off there, and I still have this huge pressure, and I'm looking to, swing back at him, as we do see a triple block there on the Shadow Spirit up construct.
Makes a lot of sense, honestly, because the only really important cards right now are Reflection and Fury. And everything else in play is expendable, but maintaining that Fury lock with the Reflection is really, really important. So, but like you said, with Feign Death, this does that, and this is looking pretty good.
Yep. We're going to see Javier activate the Ink Moth to get that +1/+1.
Yeah, so you're going to see a bit of a blood here when the Fury is able to die. It'll kill the Ink Moth, and I believe mop this entire board up.
Yeah, huge turn here if you're a YungDingo fan. Even the Ink Moth's now going to die to the Fury.
Yeah, not too much left. And the thing is, with the Reflection active, it's not even like as a sorcery speed moment where Javier can draw Pierce Paladin, put 2 hammers on it, and all of a sudden be safe from Fury. It's just always going to be there. And again, this fast clock, 28 life ain't so much when you have a 4/4 double striker in play.
Yeah, and we are going to see another Fury drawn for the turn. So now we're attacking, for about 18 a turn or whatever, if we want to, with activating Fable. So Javier is going to fall over very quickly. We see a concession, with the pickup Cigar's Aid for the turn.
Yeah, there you go. That's Fable the Mirror Breaker, folks. It's funny how a lot of the games, the Reflections never really comes into play and doesn't really matter, and the card's still great. But when it does, it's also just kind of this ultimate end game against decks like Hammer, which are not planning a lot of removal, so there aren't a lot of ways to remove it.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing here some pretty fast sideboarding from both players, as Dingo looks to be sideboarding out the Dothies and the Ragavans immediately and bringing in a ton of interaction.
Yeah, kind of going full control here. I got the Blood Moon to get the Sagas. Explosive helps there also. Needle removal spells. And again, you kind of just lean on Fury, lean on Bowmaster, lean on Fable, and don't really need to try and take any sort of aggressive stance.
Yeah, meanwhile, Javier has lined up, his own pile of cards with cutting a couple of the Ornithopters, a couple of Thoughtseize, all the Bowmasters, not really what it's about in this matchup. And looks like he's lined up, his Sanctifier and Vec, the pro black, pro red card. This is why Javier does it. He doesn't miss the little stuff like that. But also, looks like he maybe has Path to Exile as one of his cards in Surge to Salvation.
Yeah, the Sanctifier here is huge. We can see there are a few answers to it in Explosives, and of course, Grief you get out before it comes out. But once it's in play, obviously a pretty safe target for hammers. So a little bit of a song and dance here. The Blood Moons can make it a little hard to cast with the dual ends and the Ink Moth Nexus and so on and so forth. But there's a plan. We see a plan here. It's pro red, pro black, and then go from there.
Yeah, it looks like Javier is actually just going to cut his Ornithopters. And sometimes you'll see players do this when you're playing against a deck that's trying to break up all your synergies. You maybe want to sideboard out cards that really lean on those synergies, especially if you're taking out cards like Springleaf Drum, which we're seeing Javier do in this game.
Yeah, a little less filler and a little more killer.
Yep. I like that Javier is doing a little dance with his 3-drops. I think he's trying to help us on commentary. He's like, all right, here's what I'm sideboarding, just so y'all know. Normally people make you pay for this stuff, but here on the Super League, we're giving to you for free. Looks like Dingo's trying to make the worst deck list screenshot of all time, just moving his cards in random places.
I hate that. When there's the 4th card, 3 cards in or whatever, or that's good screenshot etiquette is very, very important.
Yep. You want to make sure that you're not watching when Canisher comes on then, Jim. He's going to be there and it's going to be rough. All right.
I'm preparing myself for it. I'm trying to get ready inside.
Nice. As we do, looks like Dingo here took a quick mulligan, but found the turn 1 Grief combo.
Big question for Javier. There's a Surge and a Giver. Do you play the Giver or do you hold up Surge, try and defend against the Grief? Developing your board's pretty important here. It's also, what card do I want to play so it'll be staying in play, past the Grief, the post-Grief world.
Yep. Yes, it does look like he decided to put 8 in play. We are going to see that scammed out Grief. And it's going to take all the spells from Javier's hand. But if you're a Javier fan, we have Urza Saga in hand and Ink Moth Nexus. So we actually have kind of a win lined up in just 3 turns.
Yeah, arguably the best 2 cards in hand are not takeable by Grief, which is a big advantage that the Hammer deck has here against Grief specifically as a card, where these lands are just so good. Saga making threats, fighting Hammer, and with the Cigar's Aid and the Nexus, like you said, that's just a turn 4 kill, I believe, all set up, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, as we do see, Dingo attacking in for 4 here, dropping Javier to 15, but, not as huge a deal as it might normally be. And we see Javier pick up another Hammer in hand.
Yeah, this is interesting. So now you could play the paladin and put the hammer and draw a card. You kind of like play that grindy game, but you're gonna go with the setup here, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Oh no!
Oh boy! Oh no!
How Dingo with the MTGO premium draws the Blood Moon against both cards you want Blood Moon against.
Yeah.
Oh.
So as we were just saying, the land's really, really important, and Grief can't touch those. Well, Blood Moon can. And now their Saga's gone, Nexus is neutered, and now can't even cast the poor Pure Steel Paladin.
Yeah, we are going to see a hammer just equipped and just a smacking in of 12.
Yeah, I mean, all in moment, 12-12 is pretty big. Oh, well, that's a pretty good one too.
Oh my goodness. YungDingo is like, listen, I play Modern all day, every day. You might be crushing at the Pro Tour, but this is my streets. As we see an EE for 1 looks to be the cast.
So going to leave the Construct and kill the hammer and the Abe. I think that's a pretty good job of cutting off outs. This Construct by itself, not doing enough, until the Grief can kill in 3 turns.
Yeah, huge draw for Dingo. We're seeing him sort of decide if he wants to, hold back or keep attacking. He is sort of initiating a race, wants to make sure that, think about what he knows in Javier's deck. Make sure he's not making an attack that leaves himself dead to something like, Ginger Brute or whatever.
Killed Brutski. It would be very thematic for Eldraine coming out to see Ginger Brute come in and take a game.
It's true. I love the new Ginger Brute art from Eldraine. It's really good.
Yeah, a lot of interesting candy stuff in the set. It's like the candy cane monster something, and a lot of. I did my set review yesterday, and there was a lot of interesting ones.
Yeah, we are going to see this EE popped, and Javier just stuck with a bunch of uncastables in hand. Despite his deck being mono white, the splash for black, being ever so light, does matter in situations like this against Blood Moon.
Yeah, this is a tough game for Javier, where was very well insulated against the Grief, kind of had all things going here, and then that Blood Moon was quite nasty. There are 3 copies in Dingo's board. So Dingo came ready for Urza Saga.
Yeah, and this is a matchup that can be kind of tough. You would think maybe like, oh, my deck was Surge and everything. This is like all the kill spells doesn't line up super well. And yeah, YungDingo wins the matchup. Congratulations to him. Seeing the early dub. Javier Dominguez got the Among Us on screen. He was a little sussy there and got.